You're sitting in traffic on a Tuesday morning, staring at the sea of red brake lights stretching endlessly in front of you. The radio is playing. Someone behind you honks. A motorcycle squeezes between the cars. And then, without warning, a quiet thought slips into your mind. Is this really it? You don't say it out loud. You never do. Instead, you turn the music up a little louder. You check your notifications. You tell yourself you're just tired. But the question doesn't disappear. It waits. It finds you again while you're brushing your teeth late at night, while folding laundry, while staring at the ceiling after everyone else has gone to sleep, while watching someone you barely know celebrate another promotion, another vacation, another milestone that somehow makes you wonder if you're falling behind. It's a strange feeling. Not exactly sadness, not exactly regret, just the quiet suspicion that somewhere along the way, you started living on autopilot. A few years ago, a man we'll call Daniel asked himself that exact question. Daniel was 36. He had a stable job, a beautiful wife, 2 amazing children, a house with a white fence, the SUV he'd dreamed about since college, the kind of life people congratulated him for. If you looked at him from the outside, you'd probably think he'd won. But every morning, before starting his car, Daniel sat in silence for exactly 30 seconds. Not because he enjoyed the quiet, because he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He couldn't explain it. Nothing was wrong. Yet nothing felt completely right either. He kept telling himself, maybe I just need to work harder. So he did. He accepted extra responsibilities, worked longer hours, took fewer vacations, earned another promotion. Everyone around him said he was successful. He smiled. He thanked them. And then he drove home wondering why success felt strangely empty. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe your life doesn't look exactly like Daniel's. Maybe you're still in school. Maybe you're building a business. Maybe you're raising children. Maybe you're simply trying to make it through another week. But if you've ever looked around and quietly wondered, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? Then stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why Daniel felt that way, and why millions of people do too. Here's what's fascinating. Most people believe the biggest lies are obvious, that they'll arrive dressed in manipulation, deception, or bad intentions. But that's rarely how it happens. The most dangerous lies don't look like lies. They wear the clothes of common sense. They sound responsible. They sound mature. They sound exactly like the advice loving parents give their children, exactly like the lessons teachers repeat in classrooms, exactly like the messages hidden inside advertisements, movies, social media feeds, and conversations around dinner tables. That's why they're so difficult to recognize, because nobody ever tells you this is the lie. Instead, they call it normal. They call it growing up. They call it being realistic. And slowly, without noticing, you build an entire life around an idea you never consciously chose. Pause for a second. Think about the biggest decision you've made in the last 5 years. Your career, your degree, the city you live in, even the relationship you're in. Now, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. If nobody could judge your decision, would you still choose the same path? Don't answer too quickly, because the answer might reveal more about your life than you expect. Here it is. The biggest lie society wants you to believe is that your value as a human being depends on how well you meet other people's expectations. That's it. Simple, quiet, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to shape nearly every decision you'll ever make. The degree you chose, the job you accepted, the clothes you wear, the house you're trying to afford, the version of yourself you become at family gatherings, even the reason you feel guilty when you rest. Nobody had to say those words directly. You absorbed them, one tiny message at a time, through report cards that ranked your worth, through relatives who asked, "So what are you going to become?" instead of who do you want to become? Through a world that applauds achievement far more loudly than authenticity. And once that belief settles into your mind, it quietly begins making decisions for you without you ever realizing it. Now, Daniel believed the problem was motivation, so he tried to become a better version of himself. He woke up earlier, read more books, listened to productivity podcasts on the way to work, bought a planner, set bigger goals, crossed them off, then made new ones. For a while, it worked. Every achievement gave him a small rush, a quick feeling of relief, but never peace. It's like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Because when your self-worth depends on achievement, there is no finish line, only another mountain waiting behind the one you just climbed. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you achieved something you desperately wanted? Maybe it was a promotion, a new phone, graduating, buying your first car. How long did that feeling last? A week? A few days? Maybe only a few hours. Then your mind quietly moved the goalpost again. What's next? That isn't because you're ungrateful. It's because that's exactly how the lie works. It convinces you that happiness is always waiting just beyond the next achievement. And when you get there, it quietly moves somewhere else. Psychologists call part of this the hedonic treadmill, our tendency to quickly adapt to improvements in life and return to our usual level of satisfaction. But society adds another layer. It tells us our worth depends on staying ahead. So instead of simply adapting, we start chasing approval as if it's something we can finally collect enough of. Daniel didn't know any of this. He simply assumed everyone else had figured life out. So he compared. He compared salaries, vacations, houses, fitness, careers, even happiness. Without realizing he was comparing his ordinary Tuesday to everyone else's highlight reel. Here's what's strange. Your brain was built for this. Thousands of years ago, belonging to the tribe meant survival. If the tribe rejected you, you didn't survive. So your brain became incredibly sensitive to approval. It learned to constantly ask, do I fit in? Am I enough? Am I falling behind? Back then, those questions kept people alive. Today, they keep millions anxious. Your brain doesn't know the difference between being left out of the tribe and being left out of a group chat. It reacts as if both threaten your survival. Now, imagine something. Imagine every social media app disappeared tonight. No likes, no followers, no comments, no one to impress. Would your biggest goal tomorrow still be your biggest goal? Or would something inside you begin to whisper a different answer? That question makes many people uncomfortable because somewhere beneath all the noise, most of us already know. We're chasing things we never truly chose. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. His daughter was already asleep. Again. He stood quietly outside her bedroom door. There were drawings taped to the wall, a stuffed bear lying beside her pillow, a nightlight glowing softly in the corner. His wife looked at him and gently said, "She waited for you." 4 simple words. They hit harder than any performance review ever had. Daniel realized something painful. He'd been telling himself he was working for his family, but little by little, his family had become the reason he wasn't with them. Sometimes the prison isn't built from bad decisions. It's built from good intentions repeated too long without being questioned. And that's what makes this lie so dangerous. It doesn't ask you to become a bad person. It asks you to become such a responsible person that you forget to become yourself. Some people discover this at retirement. Some people discover it beside a hospital bed. Some people discover it after their children have grown up. And some simply never discover it at all. They simply keep running faster without ever asking who designed the race. So here's another question. Who would you be if no one was watching? Not your parents, not your friends, not your coworkers, not strangers online, not the imaginary audience you've carried around in your head for years. Nobody.
What would you wear? How would you spend a free Saturday? What dream would you finally admit you've been quietly carrying? What would you stop apologizing for? Take your time with that question, because your answer isn't just interesting, it's a mirror. And sometimes the person staring back has been waiting a long time to be seen. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that night, not because everything suddenly changed, but because for the first time in years he asked himself a different question. Not, what should I do next, but whose life am I trying to live? It sounds like a simple question. It isn't. Because once you ask it honestly, you begin to notice things you've ignored for years. You notice how often you've said yes when your heart wanted to say no. You notice how many decisions were made to avoid disappointing other people.
You notice how often you've mistaken being admired for being happy. And that's a painful realization. Because you can't get those years back. But here's the good news. You don't have to. The past doesn't ask you to rewrite it. It only asks you to learn from it. For weeks, Daniel didn't make any dramatic changes. He didn't quit his job. He didn't sell his house. He didn't disappear into the mountains to find himself. Instead, he started with something much smaller. He put his phone away during dinner. He left work on time one evening, each week. He stopped saying, "I'm too busy," to the people who mattered most. He took his daughter to the park on a random Wednesday. No special occasion, no perfect weather, just because she asked. And while pushing her on the swings, something unexpected happened. She laughed. The kind of laugh that makes time feel like it slows down. She looked back at him and said, "Daddy, I like when you're here. Not when you buy me things, not when you work hard, not when you're successful. When you're here." At that moment, Daniel realized something that years of promotions had never taught him. The people who truly love you don't need the most impressive version of you. They need the most present version of you. Maybe that's something you need to hear too. Because somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that life is a performance, that every day is an audition, that our value depends on how productive we are, how attractive we look, how much money we make, how many people approve of us. But life was never meant to be performed. It was meant to be lived. Here's something most people never realize. One of the most expensive things you will ever own is a life built to impress people who aren't actually thinking about you. Read that again in your mind. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to spend much time judging you. Yet we shrink our dreams, hide our personalities, silence our opinions, and postpone our happiness for an audience that isn't even watching. Imagine reaching 80 years old, looking back on your life, realizing you successfully met everyone else's expectations except your own. That isn't failure. That's tragedy. Because at the end of your life, no one hands out awards for being the person everyone expected you to be. What you'll remember are the moments that felt real. The conversation that lasted until midnight. The walk you almost didn't take. The friend you finally called. The risk that terrified you, but changed everything. The ordinary Tuesday that became unforgettable simply because you were fully there. Remember Daniel? His life didn't become perfect. He still had bills, stress, bad days, unexpected setbacks. But something inside him had changed. He stopped asking, "What will people think?" and started asking, "Can I respect the person I'm becoming?" That one question became his compass. And little by little, his life began to feel like it belonged to him again. Maybe that's where your change begins too. Not with a dramatic reinvention, but with one honest decision. Turn your phone off for 10 minutes. Sit in silence. Listen to the thoughts you've been drowning out with noise. Write down what actually matters to you. Not what should matter, not what impresses other people. What makes you feel alive. Call someone you've been meaning to call. Say no to something you've been saying yes to out of guilt. Say yes to something you've been afraid to admit you want. Small choices, repeated consistently. That's how lives change. Not overnight, but one honest day at a time. Let's go back to where we started. Tomorrow morning, someone will sit in traffic.
They'll stare at the red brake lights stretching into the distance. The radio will be playing. Someone will honk, and a quiet question will appear. Is this really it? Maybe that someone is you. The difference is, this time, you know that feeling isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that something inside you is asking to be heard. Don't ignore it. Because the biggest lie society wants you to believe is that your worth is something you have to earn by meeting everyone else's expectations. The truth is much quieter. Your worth was never something to earn. It was something to remember. The life you've been searching for doesn't begin when the world finally approves of you. It begins the moment you stop asking for permission to be yourself. If this message spoke to something real inside you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave one word in the comments that describes how you're feeling right now. You might discover that the feeling you thought only you carried is shared by thousands of others. And if you haven't already, subscribe